Well, welcome back to Face the Nation. We are joined now by retired Air Force General Michael Hayden, who served as the head of both the CIA and the National Security Agency, and Michael Morell, who was the #2 man at the CIA until last year and now a CBS News consultant. Michael Morell also served on the panel that made recommendations to President Obama about what type of reform should be made at the National Security Agency after the revelations by Edward Snowden. Gentlemen, let me ask you both, and I'll just start with you, Mike. This situation on the border of Ukraine right now, what's your take on what Putin is up to?
So I think you have to, Bob, make a distinction between capabilities of the troops there and then Putin's intentions. The capabilities of those troops would be to take perhaps a third of Ukraine if Putin wanted to. But it would be very difficult for him to hold it, because what would happen very quickly is an insurgency would grow up and those troops would be attacked. It would be a very nasty situation. I don't think Putin wants that. That brings us to the intentions. I think what he's trying to do is maximize what he gets out of this diplomatically. He thinks he's in a strong position. He wants to come to the negotiating table.
So, what do you think he's ready to dial her back?
Yeah, I think so. I agree with Michael's analysis, but I would point out one thing that we would both be cautious of. Capabilities change slowly. Intentions can change quickly. So, we need to be concerned about this. But frankly, I think he wants to pocket the Crimean victory. I think he wants to make that a fact beyond contradiction. I think the talks between Lavrov and Secretary Kerry will not talk about Crimea. That'll be locked in and will not change. Also, Bob, you have to understand, what tools of influence does he have? I mean, is it the magnetic attraction of the Russian political system or the Russian economy? No. His tool is that threat, that danger, that presence of forces along the Ukrainian border. So I think we'll see them there for a long time, which will be troubling and potentially destabilizing. But I agree with Michael. I think he wants to move forward.
But it certainly helped his position politically at home, has it not?
It has. What he wants ultimately is he wants to make sure that Ukraine does not become part of NATO and probably not part of the EU either, and that's what he wants out of this.
But the talks that Kerry and Lavrov are having, you both see this as a good thing, as it were.
A good thing with one caution. We cannot be negotiating over the heads of the Ukrainian people. What fundamentally matters here is what the Ukrainians will for the nature of their state. So we need to be careful not even to project the appearances that we're negotiating beyond them.
Let me ask you about what's going on. The president makes this recommendation now that he wants to, basically, as I understand it, stop the National Security Agency from collecting these large banks of data, telephone numbers of Americans. You were on the panel that recommended this, Mike. So has the president, I assume you're in favor of what he's done here. This was one of your recommendations. But what difference is this going to make? How will people know?
So this is exactly what the review group recommended, which is that the government will no longer hold the data, and that anytime NSA wants to query that data, that they will require a court order. There is a competing proposal from the House Intelligence Committee, which is that the phone companies will also hold the data, but that court review will not happen before, it will happen later. I'm comfortable with that. I think we're headed in the right direction here, and I think there'll be some sort of compromise between the president's proposal, which again is consistent with the review group, and the House Intelligence Committee's proposal. They're very, very close to each other.
General, you ran the National Security Agency. Are you comfortable with this?
I am, and as Michael suggests, there's powerful convergence between what the president is suggesting and what the House Intelligence Committee has actually embodied in legislation.
Explain to me what difference does it make?
Now, here's what's happening, all right? NSA would get billing records on a daily basis from the American telecom providers, but over time, the percentage of overall billing records that NSA was retrieving got smaller and smaller. Michael's panel pointed out that they're only getting about a third, if that, just because of changes in technology. But NSA held them, and a lot of civil libertarians were concerned about that, not because that had been abused, but because of the potential for abuse. So what we get now is NSA doesn't hold it. The telephone companies hold it, but NSA gets to query the data, and here they get to query the data in an exhaustive way, not that 1/3 they formerly got. And beyond that, if you look at the language in the House bill, it actually talks about all communication. So in this sense, NSA is able to query not just telephone metadata, but digital or email metadata too. So I think we've arrived at a solution that actually makes us more safe, but gives people higher comfort that the government would not potentially abuse
But
it.
how can the telephone company do a better job of keeping it safe than the United States government might?
There is a difference between the government holding the data, which creates the possibility of abuse by the government, and the government not holding the data, which obviously doesn't create that possibility. The phone companies have held this data all along, so there's no additional risk in them taking this on.
You know, the part that worries me is not so much that the government is spying on me, but that all these commercial enterprises are spying on me. Should I be worried about that?
Well, you know, that line between our public self and our private self is shifting. So much more of our individual knowledge data is out there in the public domain for retrieval. It's a broad cultural question that we're going to have to come to grips with. And Bob, you and I have talked about this before. It's generational too. Different people at different ages think differently.
Well, I
this.
think we're redefining our whole idea of what privacy
yes.
is. I mean, people now talk about things at the dinner table that they used to not talk about behind the barn. You're seeing stuff on Facebook. Well, I mean, we all know what we're talking about here.
But in an important way, though, we are governed in the intelligence community about the reasonable expectation of privacy. That's what the Fourth Amendment guarantees. And now that definition of reasonable is shifting. That makes this work very hard.
You're absolutely right about that. Well, thanks to both of you, and we'll be back with our panel in just a second.